you. All right, so another example is Ontario's electricity system and fossil fuel phase out. Okay. Okay, who's next? Avery, I see your hand up.
Oh, sorry. Hi.
Hi.
Yeah, so I had two thoughts and they were like pretty different. One was related a bit to what Jeremy was talking about. So they just recently, there was that Supreme Court ruling in BC where they, it's between the Blueberry River First Nations and the province, about their like widespread resource extraction. So it is like a, but they, like as you were saying, like it's like a lot, like because it's about like sort of this, like all these different layers of issues all coming together to but they like won that case. And so it's sort of can, and then so they're talking about it in kind of in connection with like how it's going to impact other like things, so like especially the Site C dam in BC and all that kind of stuff. So I was interested in looking at that, but I don't know if it's like too broad or something.
So just so I could kind of like, how would the Site C fit into that? Is it separate? Is it like, so if you were talking about overall resource extraction, I would just kind of like, in order to make it a little bit more bite-sized for you, just choose one of the resource extraction industry that has wanted to extract resources from those lands.
Okay.
Then it would be a little bit easier for you to manage rather than overall resource extraction.
And then the other one I was thinking about was, and this was really vague, but like kind of the connection of like pharmaceutical companies and the environment, and like maybe like either like global production or I wasn't sure how to like narrow that down. Or,
yeah, you could
like,
go, what you could speak to is and it's not, you know, what you could speak to on that one is well, there's so many different, you know, justice issues that you can speak to with regards to the pharmaceutical companies on that one. But if you wanted to keep the environmental focus on it, you can speak to the pharmaceuticals not taking, you know, like, well, you could speak to the role that's like how the pharmaceutical waste goes into humans, but comes out of humans, goes into our sewage treatment plants. The fact that our sewage treatment plants are not equipped to do any management of pharmaceuticals in the water, and then comes into the drinking water, and the implications that would have on a specific area, on specific species, the larger public health implications that might have over time. But I would then kind of use one specific location, geography, one urban area associated with it, and then identifying the ecological impacts related to that. But then you can speak to the bigger kind of system and the change. Is the change taking place at the pharmaceutical company's responsibility, or is it the sewage treatment plant that we have to figure out where that's the solution opportunity? Okay.
great, that's very helpful. Thank you.
Okay, pharmaceuticals and water supply. Any other kind of case studies that people want to banter around?
Yeah, I guess I could.
Yeah, go ahead.
Mine. So I was thinking originally that I would like to do something in waste management. So I was thinking physical or bio waste, but more specifically, construction and raw material waste. Because I'm very like fascinated with where the material go, especially after they like dig up a road or deconstruct a building, and how is it being recycled. So I think that would be very interesting to like look
So,
further in.
yeah, so my suggestion would be to do it. Don't take it on a big scale of all the different types of waste material products. Just choose a specific waste stream that you would then be able to manage a little bit better. So if you wanted to take it, like you could probably, an area that I think would be really interesting on this topic is aggregates. A lot of quarries are taking place in many, many different communities, and there's always fights about the location, siting, quarries taking place. So you can easily find a specific community that is that wants to keep a quarry out, and you could then use your analysis into the opportunities to move from problem to solution by looking at recycled use of aggregates rather than quarrying it for virgin aggregate. You could look at some of the barriers that would be faced, and I definitely enable you to identify the stakeholders that you would need to work with to advance and increase the amount of recycled aggregate used in the supply chain so that quarries aren't needed as much as they are at present. But that would be my one suggestion for how to make it smaller.
Right. Because I mean, what I've seen so far, what I was kind of more leaning towards is kind of like road material. I guess the concrete slabs, like
Yep.
I know that they use them sometimes to line the shorelines of the city, but apart from that, I don't see it used for anything else.
Yeah, so that would be an example of how you could use recycled aggregate, because they would take the old road material, they would break it back down into their tiny, like break it all down and then kind of bring it back together. But it would give you the analysis of what's the environmental issue that is right now plaguing different communities, and it would help you move into the solution on it. But quarries and aggregate would definitely take you along those lines of road materials, because a lot of the quarrying is all for road materials. Or you could choose the demolition of buildings. But I would say that's a lot more complicated because a building is made up of a hell of a lot of different materials than a road is.
Well, thank you.
No problem. Anybody else want to throw an idea out there?
Yeah, Gabriella, I was just looking at the statistics on Toronto gas emissions from buildings, transport, and waste.
Mhm.
And I was just wondering if um I want to like analyze that gas emissions. Do I need to like cover the three,
So
areas,
you would,
or
if you wanted to kind of like, it's too big from a perspective of looking at overall GHG emissions or greenhouse gas emissions. So you'd want to break it into smaller pieces. If you want to try and address the home buildings of residential homes, that would give you you've got to break it down into a smaller, more manageable sector. So you could say right now, a lot of the programs that have been, a lot of the government programs that have been out there in market have all been geared towards people who have a lot more income than it is addressing energy poverty. So I would definitely, there is a work you can do. You can do an environmental justice analysis of energy conservation programs that Toronto residents have had available to them thus far, and see who is being served by them and who is not being served by them, and who's most in need of them and who is also not getting the needs met. So that would be a really interesting one that you could dig into.
thank you.
Okay. How's anybody else? right. So I'm going to kind of throw in a couple of the ones that we got so far. Okay. So we've got an incineration project that would then also be, am I missing anybody's hands that are still, if you, Hannah, I didn't hear from you. I see you're still there.
Yeah, the topic I want to do feels really, really broad, and I don't
Yep.
know how to narrow
That's
it
okay.
down.
That's part of this job, is to narrow it down.
So I'm more interested in, I guess, the need for culturally competent education when it comes to, teaching like low-income communities about the environment and sustainability, but I don't really
Mhm.
know
Yeah,
exactly
that's
where to
pretty
go from
broad.
there. I don't know where to go from there in order
Yeah.
to make it.
Yeah, I would, yeah, I'm struggling on that one too, because it's just too broad, and it's
Mhm.
hard to have it. You definitely need something a little bit more bite-sized. So, yeah, that's a tricky one.
I know.
Yeah.
Maybe I can think about it and then email you later.
Because let me know, like, what's drawing you to this topic? Is it because you want to focus on education?
Yeah, I think that giving specifically low-income communities the tools and the empowerment to think that they can create, that they have an impact as well. It's not just the very wealthy communities. It's not just the typical
Yeah.
like suburban communities. I want people that are in more urban areas to know that they have the power to enact change as
Yeah.
well.
I would, if you were kind of trying to do, because it's really, this is more not about education per se, it's more about empowerment of communities that have been underserved and underrepresented traditionally.
Okay.
So if that was the case, then you can kind of bring it into it about choosing an example of a community that has won an environmental justice challenge fight that they had, and the role that education and empowerment of that community played in moving from problem to solution.
Okay.
That might be the way I would kind of do it. But again, you're still going to have to do a lot more digging to find the case where education was the secret ingredient that enabled that community to move from problem to solution.
Okay. That does help a lot. I think that's going to narrow my search down a little bit.
But you know what, if I would bet you on this one that any environmental justice case study that the community kind of won would have not, the community would never have won it had not been for that community to be empowered and engaged. Like, you can't win an environmental justice fight unless the community that is being impacted is empowered and engaged and ready to win. So you can almost, yeah, you'd probably want to dig a little bit into that.
Okay.
And then you can dissect the role that empowerment played in moving from problem to solution.
Okay.
I give some more thought to that, but definitely gotta narrow that one down.
Yes, thank you.
No problem. All right, I think we've got everyone. I'm gonna change. I think I can see. Let me see. Take hand down. Let me just see. Where did I see that? All right, got it. I think we've got everyone's there. Did I miss anyone's hand? All right. So the next thing on this one that we're going to do is I am going to, if you can go into the URL, let me just actually put that into the chat just in case. We're going to put in the URL. The Google Sheet we are using to track the case studies. Oh, and I should, I'm going to share my screen.
Sorry, you said it was 4 people was okay for a group?
Yeah, I would not go
Okay.
more than 4.
Okay.
Okay, let me just get rid of this. Move this off to the side. And I'm gonna get the Google Sheet. So, oh, good, you guys are doing it already. Thank you, thank you, thank you. So what I would like you to do is go to this URL. Did I put it in the chat? No, I did not. So what I would like you to do is go into the chat. Don't worry about the data presentation. I'm just going to turn all of the number of groups we have and put them into a hat and pull them out randomly for the date of the presentation. And then what you would just do is put your case study, and then people can identify when they are what kind of interest that they would like they're interested in, which case study they're particularly interested in. If you're short on group members, then people can identify themselves as wanting to join that group. And that way, then people can know who's interested in which topic, and we can get some matchmaking taking place. Does that make sense? And yes, please know for groups, minimum of 2, of course. As I said, like if you do want to do it on your own, if you're really keen and it's really challenging for you to do it on the group, that's okay. You can do it on your own. It just means you're going to probably have more work because you're not going to be able to divvy it up the work across the team. Yeah, don't worry about the data presentation. I will do that once I get all once we get the final number of groups that will be needing to present. But yes, please go through that. Put in your possible group case study, and then people identify which ones they're particularly interested in joining. So that makes sense to everybody? All right. And we will finalize this up at next week's class. Perfect. All right. So I'm going to go back in to the presentation. Sorry, I've just got too many screens open here. All right, where did I lose it? Oh, here it is. Gotcha. Okay. I am not going to make people get dizzy, so I'm going to go directly to. Okay, so now we're going to go into a little bit of breakdown on solving the climate change issue. All right, so I did want to kind of highlight, if you've ever wanted more information on climate change and its implications and the gravity of the situation, the best place to go for it all is the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, the IPCC, which is the scientific body who is responsible for ensuring that the global society has all the scientific knowledge that they need on this one. So that's the link to the IPCC reports. Did want to kind of highlight some of the most concerning. We will go into the feedback loops on climate change. I'm not going to do it today. It's just too depressing on that one, but I'm going to go into, we will go into those ones. Did want to give you a little bit of background information. These are all just kind of opportunities for you to go down particular pathways that kind of speak to you. They're not, I'm not going to go through them now. It's just, these are your pick your own climate change adventure that you would be going on. What I'm going to speak today is about taking this big, huge, broad issue and trying to break it down into a smaller, more manageable, bite-sized chunk that you can actually focus in so that you can move from problem to solution. So again, the global issue on climate change, about 78% of GHG emissions come from the consumption of energy. So if you cannot solve climate change without solving the energy problem that we have. There's plenty of other kind of, significant percentage of GHG emissions do not come from the energy sector. They would have a completely different solution associated with them. So just in this one, I'm already kind of doing some narrowing down that you can see. I'm now moving from 100% of kind of focusing on 100% of GHG emissions I'm only going to narrow it down to the 78% of GHG emissions that are coming from energy, production and consumption of energy. In Canada, that number is not 78, it's actually 81% of our emissions come from energy. You can see from the oil and gas sector is a big contributor to the total percentage of greenhouse gas emissions from Canada. So you can see how much comes from the oil sands, and you can see the increase from the oil sands over time. You can see how much comes from natural gas. You can see how much comes from conventional oil, and then you can see from other energy sources. Oh, sorry, other fossil fuel, oil and gas energy source, GHG sources, not other places, just from the oil and gas sector. But it gives you an understanding. The oil and gas sector, big contributor. If you want to address climate change in Canada, you have to deal with the oil and gas sector. But it's not, then you can look at it, okay, so how is that oil and gas used? And then you would actually say, Canada's total energy source by that would be crude and natural gas, still a big chunk, that's how we use it. We get a coal, we do it from hydro, we get from renewables, we get it from biofuels and waste, and we have from nuclear. So these are the different pieces of the energy pie. So if we are going to be cutting back on the crude and natural gas, we're going to have to address that pie, and we're going to have to find alternative ways to meet energy needs than that pie. So the first place that a lot of that fossil fuels is used is for electricity generation. So this is an example of how much coal has been involved in the generation of electricity in Canada. You can see how much natural gas has been involved in the generation of electricity. So you can see that if you want to solve the GHG and energy conundrum, that we are going to have to get fossil fuels out of the electricity system. It's just inevitable. It's just, you can't have this much fossil fuels in the electricity system and think that you can solve climate change. One of the first biggest pieces of moving from problem to solution is going to have to be to decarbonize our electricity system. So there's, if you wanted to, okay, if let's just say you're going to be like, nope, don't want to focus in on the electricity sector. That's not of interest to me. I'm really interested in transportation and solving the climate change transportation conundrum. Then you would be digging into this piece of the pie. You would be looking at how much of our transportation emissions from our kind of transportation would be a big chunk coming from gasoline, huge chunk coming from diesel fuel. So you'd have to figure out, if we're going to address GHGs and climate implications associated with our transportation sector, we're going to have to address the huge amount of fossil fuels in our transportation system. And that's another piece of the pie you can start digging into. Then use another way you could break this down is you can say, okay, I'm not going to focus in on electricity generation. I'm not going to focus in on transportation. Instead, I want to focus in on specific sectors. I want to look at the industrial sector. How do they use their energy? Or I want to focus in on the residential sector. How do they use their energy, and how much greenhouse gas is associated with that residential sector? You could say, I'm going to focus on the commercial building sector. This is another way you can break down the pie. And if you, let's say, for example, you are looking at the commercial sector, you could be saying something along the lines of like, okay, so if I want to reduce greenhouse gas emissions that the commercial sector uses, I am going to have to address space heating. There's no way around it. I've got to address their space heating needs. I got to address their water heating needs. Those are huge pieces of the pie that you're going to have to solve in order to reduce greenhouse gas emissions from the commercial sector. if you could say, you know what, I'm not really interested in the commercial sector. I really want to focus in on the residential sector. And then if that's the case, you can then identify, okay, so if I wanted to reduce the climate change contributions from the residential sector, I am going to have to certainly address space heating and water heating, huge pieces of the pie. You're going to obviously have to address the others and get efficiency in them, but let's just kind of like focus in on the big pieces of the pie. And I just know that space heating and water heater are often provided via fossil fuels, whereas appliances and lighting and space cooling is often coming from electricity. So if you decarbonize the electricity system, what you've automatically done is decarbonize the greenhouse gas emissions associated with appliances, with lighting, with space cooling. But for all of those homes using natural gas or oil or propane for their space heating, you would not have addressed their greenhouse gas emissions. Did that make sense? All right, we're gonna, it'll kind of, it's an exercise in how you need to narrow things down in order to give you a chance of being able to move from problem to solution. So let's just say you're going to be like, oh, I'm going to focus in on water heating and how water heating is done. You can see a huge chunk of water heating is natural gas. And you know that natural gas is going to have to be phased out, and you're going to have to move into non-fossil fuel based sources of energy that can heat your water. Now, electricity, if you moved all the heating for water heating that moved from natural gas to electricity, would you have reduced your greenhouse gas emissions? Yeah, not necessarily. What would be impacting how much GHGs you've reduced by moving from natural gas to electricity?
Well, it all depends on how the electricity is produced. If it's produced by burning natural gas, then you haven't really done anything. You've just sort of moved the problem. But if it's done by a solar, wind, biogas plants that generate electricity, then maybe, yeah,
that's definitely that. Good, thank you, good point. What did I do here? Okay, again, space heating, this gives you a little bit of a breakdown in terms of the commercial and this tells you the issues with natural gas and fossil fuels in the industrial sector. And you can see fossil fuels still makes up a pretty big chunk of the energy that goes in for the industrial sector. So then, in addition to all that breakdown, that was like across the country, Canada. Now we're going to narrow it down, not to focus on Canada as a whole, but we're going to focus in on Ontario's specific greenhouse gas emissions. And you can see the situation in Ontario is that a large chunk of the greenhouse gas emissions comes from transportation, comes from industry, comes from buildings. But you can see, relatively speaking, electricity is smaller than it would be in many other provinces like Alberta, Saskatchewan, or Eastern Coast or the Eastern provinces, which still rely on a significant chunk of fossil fuels in their electricity system. Now, if I can do a little bit of a bitching session that I wanted to do, because it always helps me kind of do this, is that right now, Ontario has done one of the biggest greenhouse gas emission reduction efforts in North America by phasing out coal in our electricity system. This was not done simply on the climate change kindness in our provincial government decisions. This was done also as a business decision and an economic decision, because we all pay for the public health care costs. That's on our public kind of provincial budget. We all contribute to it. We were saving money, quote unquote, saving money by burning cheap coal in order to generate that electricity in our electricity system. However, we were producing air pollution as a result of that burning of the coal, and then paying for people to go to the hospital with asthma and respiratory and cardiovascular issues. So we were saving money on our electricity system only to pay far more money in our public healthcare system. So that kind of analysis really helped trigger Ontario to phasing out coal in the electricity system. Right now, we have a provincial government that is, using existing infrastructure that it created to move away from the coal phase out, which was generating natural gas. Using natural gas to generate electricity. There are 5 natural gas electricity generating stations in Ontario. And they were originally planned to be used, not all the time, but just to meet peak electricity demands. Our electricity demand fluctuates daily, it fluctuates monthly, it fluctuates, the different kind of time periods of electricity needs in the weekdays versus the weekends. It fluctuates through the seasons, which right now in Ontario, the time when we need the most amount of our peak electricity is often on the coldest days, the hottest days of the year, because that's all we're relying on electricity. And as a result of that, that electricity was our peak electricity needs. And it was often in the summertime when everyone had their air conditioner on full blast. And that was often considered Ontario's electricity peak days. And so the good thing about the natural gas generating thing is it's extremely responsive. You can turn it on, turn it off really quickly. So you have a lot of flexibility in the system that allows you to respond to demands for electricity supply and also ramp it down when you no longer need it. That is something that the natural gas generators provide to the electricity mix. I'll give you an example. You can't do that with nukes. You cannot just turn on the nuclear power plant and turn it off. Once it's on, it's going to continue going on. You're not going to turn your nukes down. But you can turn your natural gas down. So that's one of the reasons why we still have fossil fuels in our electricity system, because fossil fuels pose a really easy way to turn our electricity demand on and turn it off. It is one of the biggest challenges that we are going to face in decarbonizing our electricity system. Is we can go and move that to solar. We can use and move that to wind. We can, those 2 examples, we can do that. But when we also have to accommodate that the wind doesn't always blow, the sun doesn't always shine, and we have to have a storage backup to truly enable those sources of energy to be responsive to the variations in electricity demand that our population creates. So these are some of the things. It's never you can't just say oh, just get it right out. And yeah, you can, but there's cost implications about it. And everybody's going to say oh, well, solar and wind is too expensive. Actually, solar and wind is very, very cost competitive right now. I can assure you that nuclear power plants are not cheap to build, nor run, nor decommission. So if you're going to be comparing renewables to nuclear, you're going to find that renewables come out really much better on top in terms of cost per kilowatt hour. Where renewables are going to face an economic challenge is in the storage. Yes, yeah, I think that I don't know when we're paying the cost overruns for the nuclear power plants in Ontario, but yes, there was a $30 billion debt that got added to the rate base to account for the overage costs of our nuclear power plants construction. That was just thrown onto the rate base, and it was paid back. You know, I think it was like a $30 cost on every single bill. Okay, any questions on that little side tangent I went on to with regards to Ontario's electricity system? What was the questions in the chat? How much did healthcare's costs drop after we phased out the coal in that area? The healthcare costs didn't drop. The healthcare costs have only gone up. That's not because of the coal not having a cost, not saving costs, but it would be an avoided cost. It wouldn't actually be a true cost reduction. It would just mean that our healthcare costs haven't gone up as much as they would have had we not addressed the health implications associated with the coal burning for electricity generation. And that is one of the biggest challenges we face in building that cost benefit analysis. That many times these things aren't necessarily going to result in reductions in our healthcare costs, but they are going to result in avoided costs that we would have had to pay had we not put that intervention in place. Does that make sense? Yeah? No? Okay. So as we broke it down from Ontario, what time are we? Am I going too on about this? Okay. Go ahead. Lacia, go ahead.
Yeah, I just have a question because it seems like transportation is the biggest cause of greenhouse gas. But why is the solution up to this point is to add more laneways and not into other more sustainable ways of handling transportation?
There has been a traditional thinking that has been in place for a number of years, from probably ever since the 50s, where they thought the solution to congestion is to build more roads. And when you stop and think about it logically, yeah, that makes sense. You know, you got too many people, too many vehicles, not enough roads, build more roads, then you have less congestion. And it does work for a very short period of time. What ends up happening is that people demand ends up increasing because roads are a mechanism for getting in and around. So the more roads you build, you do get a temporary relief from congestion, but it's very, very, very short-lived, because what ends up happening is because it's easier to get around, because you're investing more in roadway, more drivers come onto it. And inevitably, you end up at your exact same position that you were before you expanded the road system. You got even more congestion. So in many ways, every road you build is only delaying your inevitable addressing of our congestion issues. There was the thought that transportation policy folks really did think at a certain time period in the 50s mostly. It's been proven wrong over and over again since the 70s that you cannot build your way out of congestion with relying on on roads for single occupancy vehicles. You can build your way out of congestion by giving people more options for how they are in and around different places. So right now, we think that the solution to addressing our congestion problems is to build more roads for single occupancy vehicles. And it's an extremely expensive solution that doesn't work. But if you decided to invest in not just more roads, but you're going to invest in bike lanes, pedestrianization, public transit, shared mobility. You're gonna advance anyone who's carpooling, anyone who's you're gonna be advancing people who are not polluting and using car sharing or carpooling. You're gonna be advancing infrastructure and programs for e-mobility, whether it be e-bikes, you know, those types of things. And if you give people more options for how they get to and around, they will be taking more modal, different types of modal splits. And then you get a solution like they have put into place in many European cities, where instead of just building more road infrastructure for cars, they have invested in increasing transportation options for their population by investing in making sure that those small, you know, smaller trips under 1 kilometer can be walked in a very safe way. They invested in bike lanes. They invested in carpool lanes. They invested in public transit. And instead of putting a huge amount of investment of their resources into making driving single occupancy vehicles easier, they put that investment into giving people more transportation options. And unfortunately, our government doesn't seem to be wanting to do the research that thinks that you can build more highways and solve your congestion issues. And in many ways, they're trying to use the shtick that building a highway will improve greenhouse gas emissions for the province of Ontario because it will reduce congestion. And it's not true. It doesn't reduce congestion. You might like it to wish it would reduce congestion. That would be great. But all the evidence and data shows that that just doesn't work. And at some point in time, you got to pay attention to the evidence and data than you do to what you hope is the case. Yeah, for sure. All right, any questions on that one? And it's not like the, you know, like we look at it, we think, oh, Copenhagen, what a great job they've done on it. You know what? Copenhagen was having the same debates that we're having right now in the 1970s. They just, you know, they've moved on since then and they don't keep doing the same mistakes over and over again. Which you go, you know, unfortunately, we still seem to be doing that same mistakes over and over again. You have to laugh or you cry. Okay, so we're going into that. We're breaking it down. We're still continuing on this journey of solving climate change, one country at a time, and then breaking it down into one province at a time, one city at a time. And you can see that if you wanted to address Toronto's greenhouse gas emissions, you still got to do the exact same thing. You're going to have to address things from the buildings, you're going to have to address things from transportation, and you're going to have to address things from waste. So you're thinking, how the hell are we ever going to do this? And then you realize actually that just we don't have to have this correlation. We don't have to have this kind of strong correlation between energy and GHG emissions. And we don't have to take it as kind of things. You can see that sometime in the 1970s, we started kind of separating our gross domestic product from energy and GHG emissions. And what was considered to be the case before this is that anything you do for improving energy efficiency is going to undermine the GDP. And we already did some analysis that the GDP is not the only way to measure progress that your society is achieving. And it's a very flawed way of measuring progress associated with your province, your community, your country, or anything like that. So we're not saying that this is just, I'm not trying to tout the GDP as something that truly measures progress. There's a lot of weaknesses in the GDP. But what I wanted to say with this is that the decoupling between economic growth and greenhouse gas emissions started happening in the 1970s, and we need to accelerate the separation of energy and GHG emissions even more. Honestly, this is the peak we have to do. Like it's so daunting when you think about it. We have stalled for so long on climate change action that we have a really steep curve ahead of us. Now, this slide, honestly, you don't even have to figure it all out, but this is an explanation of Ontario's energy system. And really, there's only 2 points I want you to realize about this. So you can see on the left-hand side is all of the inputs, everything going into our electricity system. And on the right-hand side is all of the useful energy that is actually turning into something that we could make use of. One point I wanted to raise out of this, you can see the inputs are a hell of a lot more than the useful energy coming out. So what this goes to show you is that our Ontario energy system is extremely inefficient, that there are opportunities for efficiency here that we have not captured just as yet. So that's the first point that I wanted you to get from this slide. The second point I wanted you to get from this slide is it is very complicated. It is not an easy system to understand, and it is really complicated, and a lot of codependencies are there. So those are the only 2 messages I wanted you to get out of this slide. One, this energy system is very complicated. 2, it is extremely inefficient at present. So there's huge opportunities for improvements.
What accounts for the fact that that input of energy doesn't yield more useful energy?
Yeah, so it's all about the productivity rate of that energy input going into it. I'll use an example. Your 100% of the energy going into an internal combustion engine of a vehicle, only 10% of that energy that went into it is actually associated with moving that car forward. The other 90% of that energy is completely lost as waste heat. It's serving no useful purpose for you whatsoever. So it's an extremely inefficient way of using energy to create the propulsion that that's what you're wanting with that energy. This is something that I love to kind of, people love to beat up renewables. They will give, they will say something like, well, wait a second, those wind turbines don't work. They only function like 30% of the time. And I was like, do you understand the efficiency associated with a natural gas electricity generating station? Do you know how much of that efficiency is able to achieve and how much is lost at waste heat? No one picks up on no one picks on fossil fuels for being inefficient, but everybody loves to pick on solar because it's only 30% efficient in terms of turning the sun into electrons. Wind turbines don't flow all the time, so they're only running, let's just say, 30% of the time. That would be their efficiency on that one. But every single source of energy is not 100% productive. There's always waste products associated with it, or the productivity is not 100%. So it's not just renewables who have the experience of not being 100% productive. No fossil fuel generating is 100% productive either. And waste heat is the biggest waste product coming out of it. This is another example of like just getting an understanding of the energy price comparisons across countries and fuel. You can see that natural gas is way cheaper than any other energy source in Canada. So you see, not only do we have a huge challenge in the sense that we rely on natural gas for a big chunk of our energy supply, but there's a price differential that's going to be something we have to address in switching from natural gas to electricity. And I know that we all love to whine and whinge about how much we pay in all energy costs, but you can see in comparison to other kind of countries, we do not pay as much as many other countries pay for our energy. So one of the big, most powerful things, and the reason I chose energy as the piece that's like huge, that we're trying to break it down into a smaller, more manageable chunk, is the fact that energy serves as a wonderful connector. It brings so many, it immediately addresses a whole bunch of system issues and system challenges that we're going to face. You can also kind of identify some of the actions that will enable us to reduce our energy, also have a return on investment in the sense that you pay to improve the efficiency, but you can get that investment back by not having to use as much energy and pay for as much energy into the future. But it does mean that you got to pay for it on the front end and then you save over the long term. So there's an issue with upfront capital costs that we're going to have to address as we move towards encouraging energy efficiency. You can also see that some energy efficiency measures have a better return on investment in terms of enabling energy savings to pay for the actual cost over time. Now, I don't want you to get into this too much on the cost abatement curve. This is a dated cost abatement curve. It's 10 years old. It hasn't been updated since. It's not really relevant. All I just really wanted you to show you on this one is that some energy efficiency measures are easier to build the business case for than others. In the transportation sector, I would like to say that we have to turn around the pyramid because, let's face it, we see single SOV stands for single occupancy vehicle, and it really should be the bottom of the hierarchy that we make investments in. But I can assure you, in our transportation investments that we make both at the municipal level, that we make at the provincial level, and that we make at the national level, we are putting a lot more money into streamlining access from roads and transportation options for that single occupancy vehicle. And we are not nearly investing as much in pedestrians, cyclists, and public transit. And that's completely messed up. You follow the money. It's just, if you're going to invest in roads, you're going to be fostering the use of the single occupancy vehicle. Existing buildings. We did kind of break it down into the chunks. If you want to address it, yeah, people love to complain about bike lanes. Oh boy, oh boy. Oh, sorry. I'm not going to cry. Okay, existing buildings. So what the hell can we do to move from problem to solutions in existing buildings? One, we have to retrofit existing buildings towards net zero emissions. So we have to remove fossil fuels from building or used in existing buildings. We have to probably move that over to electricity in the form of heat pumps, geothermal heat pumps, renewables, and we got to make sure that our electricity system is got the fossil fuels phased out of it. So it's a clean electricity system. We have to get more efficiency, and more efficiency. We are extremely wasteful in the way of energy inputs as we design our buildings. And we really need to build a stronger building envelope that reduces the need for how much energy needs to go into that building to keep it comfortable, both in warmth and coolness. There is a return on investment associated with all of this. And what I mean by that is that all of these investments will pay for themselves over time by reducing the amount we have to pay in energy costs. There's also a huge local economic development opportunity associated with this. One, most of the money we spend on energy doesn't stay within our local community. It often leaves our communities. Most of it even leaves our province and goes out west or goes down to the south, to the US. So based on that one, if all of the money that we spend on energy leaves our communities, but all the money we spend on efficiency stays within our community because these are local jobs, these products can't be bought on Amazon. They could still be bought in big box stores or anything, so it doesn't necessarily help the mom and pop shops, but it does mean that you get that local economic development happening, and you also get that local job creation happening because retrofitting these buildings is very labor intensive and a lot of job creation opportunities come from it. For new buildings, what do we need to do? So new buildings, every building that we build that is not zero emissions is going to have to be retrofitted in 10 to 15 years. It's just, so the more we can do to accelerate the movement towards net zero emission buildings will only save that property owner money over the lifetime of that building. Because I can assure you, it's going to cost a hell of a lot more to retrofit it than if it had been built to net zero right from the point of construction. Waste. So accounts for about 5 to 10% of a community's emissions. And right now it's a completely wasted resource. So again, this is another example of where I think the hierarchy has totally gone out of whack. You know, it's supposed to be reduce, reuse, recycle. It's pretty much just recycle. Don't think about reducing or reusing, just throw it into it's the same behavior that we've always had. Just throw it into the blue box and let somebody else worry about it. And we really do need to invest in the reduce and the reuse and not just rely on the recycle as our waste management strategy. Because I can assure you it doesn't come cheap and it doesn't really, it's missing a huge opportunity. Why don't we build buildings to last any longer? Probably you mean, you could say that one of the reasons why they probably don't build buildings as high quality as they used to is probably relating to how much it costs in terms of the upfront purchase price. So if you build a building that would be built like it was in the 1920s, labor costs were cheaper then. So right now, everything that they would be trying to do is to reduce the purchase price, the upfront capital costs, because then that makes them more competitive in the market. So I would say it's again the balancing. Developers, in many ways, don't care how much you're going to be spending on energy over the course of your lifetime of your building, because they've already sold you the property and they made their money and they're good. You are the one who's going to be having to pay all those ongoing energy costs. So it's a matter of also educating the market so that they're demanding things from developers, because developers will say it's a chicken and egg thing. They're going to say to you, we don't have the market asking us for higher energy efficiency. Why would we? And now you're just going to add more cost onto the purchase price. It's already hardly affordable. And then they love to throw out the affordability argument as a justification for not building more efficient buildings. It's the classic one that you immediately comes out right beginning. So I did kind of highlight the pathway to low carbon, the Transform TO. City of Toronto recently changed the deadline for when they are aiming for net zero from 2050 to 2040. That just happened and they just updated their plan to try and address it. They still have a huge gap that they need to address. That's there. But I did want to kind of highlight Transform TO is a really great plan that highlights how you take this big community of the City of Toronto and break it down to the different component pieces to get you to net zero by a certain date. These are an example of what would need to happen in order for Toronto to reach net zero emissions by 2050. Even though they changed the number to 2040, but they did do some updatings, there's still a gap that they need to fill. So I am looking at the time. Okay, I'm going to stop here. We are going to do, we're going to do a little bit of a tour of moving from problem to solution. And I think I might have, let's see, did I lose the, I think I lost the, oh yeah, here it is. I got it, sorry. Move this. I'm going to stop the sharing so I can see you. In the next class, we are going to do a little bit of a tour of climate action and what it looks like and how you scale that up, because it's not like climate action isn't happening. It is happening. It's just still at the token stage. And we need to move away from these token greenie projects to addressing it scale up and the system as a whole. So I did want to kind of highlight, yes, if the deadline for assignment number 1 is tonight, if there's any major issues that you're having, just let me know, send me an email, get in touch with me. Please do go to the Google Sheet and identify some of the topics or groups that you may want to join, or topics that you would like to advance, and then others can join your group. So please do spend some time on that in the next week. We're gonna go into a little bit of the assignment we're gonna dig into that more next week, and also follow through on this class. And I'm also gonna give you some examples of some case studies that we're gonna do next week as well. Any questions before I wrap up today's class? I know this was a really quick tour of how you solve a problem like climate change. Oh, good. So, yeah, but it goes to show you that everything has solutions. Everything has solutions. And what you just need to do, if you can't find the solution, what you need to probably do is break it down into a smaller pieces so that you can find the intervention and the action that you can advance to move from problem to solution. And if you're having problems thinking about it from that perspective, it's probably because your topic or your idea is just too big and it's not bite-sized enough. And if that's the case, just send me an email, and we can start kind of doing some brainstorming on how to scope it down. Does that sound okay? Great. I'm sorry again for throwing so much information at you. And again, keep in mind, I did want to kind of highlight, the goal of this class is not to bombard you with too much information. It is not to expect you to memorize any of this stuff. It is not about memorizing environmental science or environmental problems. I'm not testing you on that. What I really will be wanting you to do, and what the assignments are geared towards, are taking the processes, the ideas, the structure, the pathway, that and applying it to specific environmental justice issues or some environmental solutions that you really want to dig into. So this is very much a build your own kind of adventure on the class, but the purpose of this one is not memorization, but testing out your ability to apply different frameworks to enable you to get as much in your toolbox as you possibly can as you tackle these environmental justice and social justice issues. So that's okay. I will shut up now. All right. Any last kind of questions that anybody has? I will be here, but have a great week. And I will be getting back to you on the marks for the assignment number 1 by midweek. Thanks, everyone. Have a great week.
Thank you.
And I'll stay around for a little bit if anybody has any questions for me. And I didn't actually take the time to notice when the sun went down today, because I was going to use that as an opportunity to kind of, enjoy the movement as we go towards the longer days.
It was a beautiful red
Oh,
sunset.
sorry.
Oh, good. I missed it completely. All right, have a great weekend, everybody.
I just wanted to say I don't have a question, but the assignment that's due tonight.
Jeremy, are you there?
Sorry.
Oh, I think you go ahead, Jeremy.
Oh, okay. Yeah, the assignment that's due tonight, the second reading that I'm supposed to do, like the website, it's not working for me. I've tried.
Oh, okay. You could choose another organization if you want.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Okay.
Choose another organization. Doesn't matter which organization you go with.
All right. I'm just not sure if there's any available. I think there is though. There should be.
Let's just see.
Okay.
Because there's probably others. Let me just go through that. Sorry, give me 1 second. I gotta go to that.
Sorry, I didn't mean to take over.
Oh, no,
either.
no, 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 no.
No, I don't
I'm just
know if, I
looking
think,
to find the right Google sheet for it.
I think other people have more important things to.
Oh, no. Let me just, sorry, I'm just gonna pull it up here. And if they are all accessed, I'll give you another one.
Alrighty.
Okay.
I was kind of looking forward to the one that I have, but
I know. Which is the website that's down?
which one is it now? It's, I think, CHEJ.
Huh,
Do you know that one?
no.
CHEJ. It's oh, it says temporarily down for maintenance. That's what it
Oh,
was.
okay.
So yeah,
Um,
unfortunately, I didn't really get a chance to tackle that one yet. So I'm gonna
yeah,
start it
no
now.
problem. Was
I,
it
had a-
more of an environment? That would be more of an environmental kind of on the spectrum of environmental
Yeah.
justice more than sustainable development. Is that kind of?
Yeah.
So
I
then
think
we
so,
need to
yeah.
find you a new environmental justice one.
Okay.
I'm gonna give you Environmental Justice Canada. Let's see, this one, let's do this one.
Okay. Hold on one second. Which one?
Just pulling it up now. I just want to make sure that one's
Oh,
active.
sorry.
Oh my God, that's such an ugly website.
I know some of them are pretty ugly. I mean, especially when.
And I'm not giving you that one, sorry. I'm pretty sure someone would have taken eco justice as well.
So there's two different ones. One's environmental justice. The other one
Yeah.
is.
I just looked at the Environmental Justice Canada and the website's boring. West Coast Law Environmental Association. I'm gonna just give you that one.
Okay. Gwen, what's going on?
Okay,
Did she
this
just
is
leave?
the one, I would add this one to your
What is
to-do
she
list
doing?
then.
Okay.
Okay. That one. They're a great organization.
Okay.
And you know what that you didn't have any issues with your sustainable development organization, correct?
No, like with the website, you mean?
Yeah.
No, not at
No?
all.
Okay.
That
Yeah,
one's
so take the West Coast environmental law as your environmental justice kind of example.
good. Okay then.
All
All right.
right,
Thank you so
perfect.
much.
Thanks.
All
Have a
right,
good
thanks.
week.
All
Speak
right,
to you
you too.
later.
All right.
Bye.
Bye-bye.